Hey, this is Jewls, and this is the Daily Reflection Podcast. The only thing that I knew to do when I felt bad inside about myself was to use, to drink, and to drug. I truly blamed him that I was an addict, an alcoholic, and my husband was a control freak. I used to blame him. I say that, I just told y'all. But I realized that it was my fourth step that made me realize that I do play a part in that.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts Michael L. and Lee M. On this show, we try to bring inspiration for those people seeking sobriety through interviews with members of the recovery community sharing their experience, strength, and hope through the lens of the Daily Reflections book. Each day, a new inspirational passage and a conversation. We are not affiliated with any 12-step or recovery program, but you will hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. Today, we're talking with Jewls W. from Neptune Beach, Florida. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to ask for your help. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd love to ask you to leave us a rating. Let us know what you think of the show. It's going to help us improve the show and expand our reach. We hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, Lee. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. I'm doing great this morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic. What's going on today?
So today is April 11th, and super excited to have Jewls W. from Neptune Beach, Florida with us this morning. We heard her share on a meeting not long ago, Mike, and we loved what she had to say so much that we invited her to come be part of our podcast today. So she's sharing with us on a word to drop, blame.
Well, Jewls, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me here.
So we get the show started in the same way every day. We ask the guest if they would read the daily reflection. Jewls, would you help us get started?
Sure will. Okay, so April 11th, a word to drop, blame. To see how erratic emotions victimized us often took a long time. We could perceive them quickly in others, but only slowly in ourselves. First of all, we had to admit that we had many of these defects, even though such disclosures were painful and humiliating. Where other people were concerned, we had to drop the word blame from our speech and thought. 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, page 47. When I did my fourth step following the big book guidelines, I noticed that my grudge list was filled with my prejudices and my blaming others for my not being able to succeed and to live up to my potential. I also discovered I felt different because I was Black. As I continued to work on this step, I learned that I always had drunk to rid myself of those feelings. It was only when I sobered up and worked on my inventory that I could no longer blame anyone.
Well, thanks for reading. I know this one resonates for me. As you read this, Jewls, what are your thoughts on how what hits you first right off the bat?
Well, what hits me first is just the word blame alone is such a powerful and really a negative word for me. But now, as I have truly, as it says, dropped the word blame, as I've been in recovery for about 9 years now, it's just a vision of my past and how far I've come in these past 9 years, because I really have dropped the word blame towards myself and towards others, but it's been a journey to do that. But it used to be a very dark, evil, a word that literally took up space in every cell of my body.
The reflection talks about, defects and admitting that we have these and I guess working through them. Do you want to talk a little bit about your process of getting to a space where you're okay?
For my defects. So first of all, we had to admit that we had many of these defects, even though such disclosures were painful and humiliating. Well, I thought I was just defected in so many ways. And it was that I didn't know how to handle. I was so defected. Mostly it was about relationships and communicating and the lack of communicating. So my defect was that. And so I try to correct it by, having those first few sips of alcohol or drugs were even part of my story. It made me feel less defected. And it just eased my communication with individuals, for a short period of time. I really didn't know that I had actual character defects. When I first came in the program, I didn't know what that meant, but I also didn't know that there was hope, and that I could actually change the person that I was. I did not know that. I thought I always was going to have to live with those emotions and that distance, that void that I felt with the relationships and with the lack of ability to communicate well. I just thought that was me. I learned, through the steps that I could become aware of those character defects and be guided through a sponsor and actually hone in on them and learn how to navigate differently through life and take care of those.
Yeah, that's the promise really that this program offers us, is that, we can have healthy communication and good interaction with people if we work these steps. So I'm just curious, like, as you were leading up to the time where you got into the rooms, what was that like for you? A little bit maybe about your drinking story, but also because you're talking about relationships. So what was the unmanageability like in a holistic way?
So I grew up in a home where my father left early within the first couple of years of my life. And so there was the first lesson of, shut the door, leave, and I'm supposed to move forward. And then that lack of communication, because then he was just gone. And right now I sit here as like, I don't have any blame. I completely surrender to that past. And then my mother has been a functioning alcoholic, a highly functioning, amazing woman, and an alcoholic, something I don't quite understand. That wasn't my journey. And so I know what it feels like to be drunk and to
Thanks so much
have
for
a
listening.
substance to
If you want to
change
find
the
us
way
online,
I
you can
feel
follow us on
and
Facebook
to
at
not really be able to
facebook.com/groups/daily
communicate with
reflection
people.
podcast.
So
You can
I was
find
just
us on
raised
Twitter
in a household
at
that
Daily
I
Reflector.
didn't really receive.
You can read stories of
to me,
recovery
I really
from our
don't feel like I
community
received
at
a lot of
blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. Please
embrace.
don't forget to give us a rating
Physical
on your
embrace.
podcast app.
I
We
know
greatly
that there was so
appreciate it.
much
Have a
love
great
in that
day.
house. I know that my parents love me. My mom remarried, so I had a wonderful stepfather and father. But I just don't feel like I was shown and modeled the way a relationship is really supposed to be, in a physical and emotional way. And so that lacked. So I didn't really have that foundation. It's just been a journey for me to find that on my own, literally. At 31, I went into a rehab. Truly, almost 9 years ago to the day, I think it was March 28th or 29th, I went into my first rehab 9 years ago. I will be 40 on April 3rd. And so I spent my 31st birthday in that rehab. Before I got into the rehab, how are my relationships? I guess, like I said, I just I used alcohol and drugs to kind of, what do they say, that liquid courage? Yeah. So I used it for that, just to be the sauce for me to kind of communicate to people. Because Lord knows I could not share my feelings and communicate well all my life. And so I had a lot of deep stuff hidden inside of me because I really never was able to tell my truth, like speak my own truth.
The courage sauce. I used it for courage in social situations. I'm a kind of an introvert, and anytime I had to be with large numbers of people, I turned to the solution there. And I guess that's like relationships, right? So as you came into the program of recovery, how long before you started to realize that it wasn't really about the substances, that it was about something deeper?
Well, that definitely took a few years. I really would say that because, well, honestly, I came into the program, 9 years ago, and struggled with, I thought I was just a drug addict. So, and I went into rehab, and within the first hour, I was actually told that I didn't need my birth control because I was pregnant. that was a big shocker because I really, truly wasn't planning on having children. And my husband and I had spoken about it and we weren't. And so I learned of that and I did quit drinking. I quit using drugs because now I knew that I was having a little baby and I needed to take care of myself. But you know what? I couldn't stop drinking. They sent me home and I could not stop drinking. The Lord only knows how much I drank. It's not that I tried to block it out, but because I do vividly remember, that I couldn't stop drinking. I remember that I had it, I found it within me to not drug because I had this little body growing inside of me, and I really went to rehab only for my drug addiction. That was it. I wasn't planning on quitting drinking. That wasn't what I signed up for. I didn't think I had a problem with that. I drank some. I definitely didn't drink alcoholically like I wanted to. As I moved through the pregnancy, we ended up having had a wonderful, awesome child. She's 8 now, and her name is Aspen Joy. And I call her my angel baby, and I don't tell her why now, but I can't wait for that day for me to be able to tell her why. She's my angel baby. I quit doing that the drugs, and moved over to alcohol. And so once I had her, I thought, well, great. Now I have this baby. This is going to be just the catalyst to help me to really not drink. I'm going to be nursing her. And I had this whole grand plan that I'll be home with her and life is going to be different and better. And I remember sitting on the sofa and holding this newborn and just thinking, oh my gosh, now what do I do? My husband had left. I had Percocets because my doctor decided to give me Percocets because I had a natural delivery, and they knew that I was in recovery, and pills were never my thing. But now I'm sitting at home, and clearly my hormones are also going crazy, and I start using the Percocets not as I should. I had no pain, and I started using those, and then my husband found out and dumped them. And it was the very next day, within 24 hours, I was back at the liquor store, drinking to change the way I felt, because I used the substances to change the way I felt, because something inside of me, was still a void. There was still some space inside of me. I just wasn't okay with me. I didn't have, over these past 9 years, I've been able to really understand it was just this self-worth. I don't know why I didn't have the self-worth that was missing, but I will tell you this. I didn't believe in God. And so I think perhaps it was just feeling so lonely. I didn't have this guide, this power greater than myself. My power greater than myself was drugs and alcohol. I thought my baby could become a power greater than myself to keep me sober. That wasn't working. And so there I was, and I knew I had to get plugged back in. I started doing, AA and tried to stop drinking, but literally I would leave the house with $1 because that's all I could be trusted with. Go with the newborn with Aspen, go to my ladies' meeting, gripped, just completely gripped, sitting there, praying that I would put that $1 in the bin, and donate it to the clubhouse. Half the time I would, half the time I would leave there and go to the liquor store, just literally for that one bottle of vodka, that little mini bottle of vodka. Then I would scrounge around for some coins and maybe be lucky enough to find another for $1, another $1 or $2. That was the early part of my journey, and recognizing that it wasn't just the drugs. A drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. And alcohol is a drug. And I had the disease of addiction, no matter what substance it was.
So insidious, the grip of addiction. It's so hard to recognize it, in all of its various forms, and then be willing to move on and let go. And I think what I heard you say was, I didn't have a belief in a higher power. I had nothing. So basically you take away the thing you had, and then you have nothing. What was that process like for you to start to go, oh, maybe there is something greater than myself that can help me? And how did that sort of unfold for you in your recovery?
Yeah. So actually, I have a really, to me, such a neat connection now with God. I was told about a church here in Jacksonville Beach that you could go to in your baggies and your flip flops and your hair, sandy from the ocean. As a surfer, that was really attractive for me. And I was like, what are you talking about? In my mind, I thought, but I am an addict, alcoholic. I can't possibly walk into a church. I have to be perfect, and then I can walk into a church and hear this message. And I was assured, no, that's not how it is. And when I walked in there and I just looked around and I started hearing, God speaking through the pastor to me, is when I learned and started to feel of just something different, like that spiritual awakening that they talk about started to happen in that room and here at the beach in a church, somewhere where I didn't think that a derelict like me would ever go and be welcomed. And there was some space where I actually, I would walk into the building and still feel so not like I belong, but I still wanted to be there. So they had an overflow room and there would be nobody in the overflow room, but I just needed to just sit there and just wrestle with the fact that there is something powerful trying to reach in and grab me and tell me that I am not alone and that there's hope for me. I used to sit, I literally would sit there and crave a drink or a drug. And I remember this day, I was thinking in my head like a habitual thought, well, when I leave here, maybe I can go get something. Maybe I can. Well, if I left here early, maybe then my husband won't know that I'm, and I would do that in my head before. But this one day I didn't do that. And it was like this moment where I said, oh my gosh, I'm not doing this. I don't know if that makes sense. And it just started happening. I'm shaking right now, just thinking that must have been the very beginning. And then I just started to realize that I truly am not alone, and that I love my journey. Looking back over these past 9 years, I listen to the same pastor all these years later, and I actually delve deeper and deeper into my faith. And I know that no matter what, every single thing that I did, all the lies that I told, that entire person that I was in the past, yeah, she exists, but she exists to make me a better me today. And I love that. I'm not going to wish to ever shut that memory out, shut that door. It propels me. I say it's like that foundation. I had to fall so far down to just be able to bounce and have a place to come up from. But God is a part of my story, a big part.
Yeah, I relate to that. So today's reflection talks about a grudge list, being filled with prejudices and blaming others. Can you relate to that? Can you talk a little bit about blame?
I'll tell you blame. The word blame, I blamed my husband. He was the control freak. I actually almost called you, Lee, a few days later, and I was going to tell you I can't do this, but I talked it through with my sponsor. I talked it through with a couple of my friends. And I also recognize that, God is just speaking through you. I clearly needed to look at the word blame again, and I actually kind of had to go through making sure that I did a thorough fourth step because of this. So I've actually it's been a process for me knowing that this was coming up. I've actually had to deal with it in my head. So I think even though I didn't want to talk about, and I don't want to throw my husband under the bus and call him a control freak and then Lee said, well, you're still married to him? I'm like, yes, we're better than ever. We're coming up on 15 years. She's like, well, then that's a story that people need to hear. So I think I'm supposed to talk about blame.
How does the word blame show up for you in your life today? And in terms of recovery and the evolution of how that looks for you?
So blame, when I look at this word, it's a journey. This word just spells journey over the past 9 years, because I just really tried to take the easy route, tried to blame. Early on, I would say, well, maybe I'm this way because my dad left us. And maybe it's because of this and that. I never felt loved. Or maybe it's because I married a man who, he's older than me. And so he was trying to control me. And the only thing I could do was, when I felt like he was perhaps being condescending to me and speaking down to me, the only thing that I knew to do when I felt bad inside about myself was to use, to drink, and to drug. It's the only thing that made me feel better. I truly, truly blamed him that I was an addict, an alcoholic, because of the way I was raised, and my mother was an alcoholic, and my husband was a control freak. And I thought that for a few years. And then I remember doing my 4-step. I had a lot of white chips the first couple of years, I got to tell you. And I never did the steps. I would attend meetings until I finally went into rehab. And when I got out, I did the things that were suggested finally, and I got a sponsor. And I remember working that 4th step and listing all of the things that the people who got in between me and, yes, as it says, my successes, and got in between me feeling good about myself. It was their fault that I don't feel confident and worthy. And then we got to the last part, the last column, and it was literally like I was in preschool. And my sponsor is saying, okay, here, this is where you are going to write what your part was. No, I don't have anything to do with this. It is their fault. And when I really sat and sat down, and I couldn't do that on my own. I mean, I had to have her listening to the faults that I was placing, the blames I was placing on these individuals, and then going through how it affected me and what it affected in me. And she had to literally ABCD me. Oh no, this was partly you, because you didn't say something that, hey, this is hurting my feelings. Oh, hey, I don't like that when you speak to me like that. Or, I didn't know that I actually could say that. I didn't know that my voice, I didn't know my voice worked. I'm still really practicing that right now. So it's just that fourth step that really helped me to understand that I do have a place and I do play a role in it. And you know what I heard first time ever in my life was, you teach people how to treat you. That within itself was a spiritual awakening.
I want to find out more about the relationship now, though. So It sounds like the 4th step was monumental for you, and I love that. What's going on now with the relationship?
So, yeah, what a transformation this has been. Honestly, I'm going back to God. God is so good. I used to pray this prayer, and I said, God, please give me thicker skin and soften his heart. And so that was my husband. And I prayed that for years. And when I would go to church, I would write on, the prayer cards, I would write prayers for him to come to church. He is a Christian, and he believes in God. It's just he wasn't coming to church with us. Every so often he would, but it was just me taking our baby Aspen, and it was just me sitting and trying to get connected and stay connected to the Holy Spirit. And so I put the prayer down for him to come to church and just to be open. And I prayed that so much. And you know what? I started to just change. I was changing. I was going to the meetings. I had started to go to Codependence Anonymous, which has absolutely been a really amazing thing for me. So I was going to AA, Coda, and I was building me. I was finally building me and gaining this self-confidence, this self-worth. I was taking care of me, also taking care of our baby. And I just was getting better. And when I started to get better and love myself, I remember a time like I would be driving in the car back in my disease or in the first few years of my disease, or first few years in recovery. I didn't even sometimes want to sit in my car because there's two mirrors. I had two mirrors and I didn't want to look at myself. But that was this self-hate I used to have. And I started to like myself and then love myself enough to respect and honor my space and my time. And even if it wasn't right for him that I was going to go to a meeting, but I needed to go, I just literally had to muster up the strength inside of me to go, self-talk, just go, just damn it, get out of the house. It doesn't matter what he thinks. I need to build me, because then everything else, as I heard in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, as I heard even in church in a way, and as I heard through my sponsor and the friends that I had in the fellowship, that these people around me will start to change. You can't make them change. You can only change yourself. And so I did that. And day after day, week after week, month after month, and then literally a couple of years after a couple of years, and then prayers maybe being answered too. Let's say that. He did change. I was changing. We started changing together. And we started finding this different rhythm. And we decided to have another baby. And after 22 months sober, I had a relapse. And it was a very quick relapse. And it was just enough to say, oh my gosh, everybody was right. My disease is doing push-ups and squats in the parking lot. And so I went full force for a weekend, realized that I am an absolute addict and alcoholic. Something happened then. I was like, I really wanted to have another baby. So I was sober for about 6-8 months. And then we started trying, and her name is Hope. And so once we had Hope, Hope, literally, figuratively, he started joining me, and all 4 of us were going to church together. And I'll tell you what, everything just started to change. So our marriage, we're going to celebrate 15 years of marriage. We are so connected. I never thought that I was going to have that, because there were so many times that we were going to get a divorce, and we are one. And we have God at the center of our home, and we have this magical, amazing relationship, marriage. We are best friends again. And this is all happening truly within the past 3 years. I used to blame him. I say that, I just told y'all, but I realized that it was my 4th step that made me realize that I do play a part in that. That's no longer how I feel at all. I don't blame him at all. And you know what? He was trying to just maybe keep me alive. I don't know. Keep me safe, keep me from harming me, our baby. So I'm in a much different space, and we have a wonderful connection, wonderful marriage today.
Jewls, that is such a beautiful story. I am so glad you shared it. I know probably most of us understand the concept of feeling so put upon and so victimized by the world, as we're using and drugging and putting ourselves in our relationships with our kids and our spouses and our friends in jeopardy. And you just described just such a beautiful story of transformation through the steps, just the awareness of the 4th step. And of course, we're in the 4th month right now. And just how powerfully this program can work to transform our lives. And I see that in your relationship with your husband, and I know it's going to give a lot of people a lot of hope. And I really want to thank you for being willing to tell your story. I know you've done a lot of work to show up here today, and I just want to acknowledge you for that and thank you. And It's been a blessing to have you on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Jewls for stopping by. And thanks to you, the listeners. If you want to join our community, you can find us online at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.